G'day, g'day. NotJah Witness here with a very, very special guest, former Scientologist Chris Shelton. How you doing, mate?
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Not at all.
Yeah, yeah, it's good to be here.
Thank you. Now, for those who don't know, you were raised in the group for over 20 years, I believe it was, or 25 years, somewhere there. You left in
Yeah.
2013, and since
Mhm.
then you've pretty much been vigorously working against Scientologists, or Scientology, I should say. And you've even assisted, if I'm not wrong, in one of the episodes of Leah Remini's Scientology in the Aftermath. Is that correct? That's what IMDb tells
All of
me. Yeah. That is
all
awesome.
all of those things are correct. Yes, I was raised as a second generation Scientologist. My parents got involved when I was about 4, and I became a active participant in the church myself when I was 15, and I started working for it when I was 17, right out of high school, and I continued doing that until I was 42 years old. In 2012, I got out of the working for the church, and in 2013, I got out of the church entirely, and it's
Okay,
been quite a wild ride.
fantastic. Obviously, everyone can probably see, or hopefully see, that we also have the lovely Nadine here. She's our side chat moderator, so if you do have any questions for Chris, make sure to tag Nadine in them, just to ensure they're caught, and hopefully we'll ask them at the end. So today I
Okie
really
dokie.
wanted, yee, I wanted to basically have just an open discussion about similarities between the two groups, obviously Scientology and Jehovah's Witnesses, in the sense that they are control groups of people and how to reach them, basically. So for a start, one thing I've noticed is that Jehovah's Witnesses will often see Scientology as a cult while they are completely blind to the possible similarities between the groups. And I was wondering if this is something similar with Scientology. Do they look at witnesses or other religions in that way that, oh, they're a cult, but we're not? Is that something that is common?
It is. It's a common characteristic of all destructive cults, and in fact, not just destructive cults. We're all biased toward our own group. But when it comes to other religious groups, Scientology's position is basically they are the only ones who have any line to anything remotely like the truth. And so everyone else obviously is getting it wrong. So they don't really pay a lot of attention to the specific practices or beliefs of other religions because Scientologists just don't care. They
They're not
might
even
have
interested.
some experience from before they became Scientologists with other religious groups or come into Scientology as a Christian or something like that, but they tend to drop those things before and just let Scientology take over their life.
Okay. Well, because that's obviously interesting. A lot of the first thing people will hear about Scientology from somebody in, or they'll be like, it's not a church. You can come in with any faith, and that's okay. So that is kind of true, but it's that at some point they will sort of lose that and, follow through with Scientology instead, or it'll take over.
Oh, yeah, no, they don't say it's not a church. They say that it's non denominational.
Uh,
And so there's kind of a big difference there. Scientology is all about being a church, but they just say that you can be a Scientologist and you can be a Christian too. And at the beginning, that works out okay. Nobody's giving you a lot of pressure. Nobody's particularly ragging on you about your other religious practices or something. But gradually, the more you get involved in Scientology and the more you get into the Scientology mindset and social circles, then you'll start feeling little hints and pressures, and you'll start encountering critical remarks about Christianity or religion in general in L. Ron Hubbard's lectures and in his writings. And that's what starts getting you doing the double thinking. Well, gee, maybe Christianity doesn't have all the answers, and Scientology does, and so therefore, and then you start kind of moving away from those other religious beliefs.
ah, okay. That is very interesting because I mean, obviously that's just very different to most most other religions I'd be familiar with, where you're, you know, to go in, you got to give up your old one. You know, like you got to fully commit from the get go. Um, that
Yeah,
is
no, they don't
interesting.
do that. And it's smarter of them not to do that because then they get more members,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But it also speaks to the religiosity of Scientology. It's not a religion. I mean, let's just be blunt. It's one, it's a destructive cult, and two, it's a scam. It's a business scam that hides itself as a religion. It uses
Yeah,
religious cloaking. So that's a very different thing from, what the Jehovah's Witnesses are, I would say. And there's a lot of arguments about this and a lot of conversation to have about it because it's not easy to just dismiss Scientology's religiosity. And for some people, they think all religions are destructive cults, which isn't true either. But that's what they think, or they think that at least all religions are cults. They're all cults. You get this out of atheists and stuff. And I'm an atheist, so I get to say that.
yeah.
But that's the kind of thing you get when you put this out there. So it's kind of a nuanced conversation, really. But I'm just kind of putting that out there. Just go, hey, it's Scientology.
Yeah, no, no, I get that as well because I think I saw one of your interviews with Lloyd where it was you were talking about the differences in the origins of the religions, or again, I'm gonna the
Right.
groups. You know, it's just simplifying it a bit, and how the Jehovah's Witnesses started as a true believing group, like they believe what they were doing. Whether it's that now is definitely debatable, but at least that's the way it started, and that sort of what made it a true religion of sorts. Whereas Scientology did not have that start. The founder, you could argue, didn't have any belief in it himself, and just made it up for a following, and as a sort of cult personality to fraud, defraud people basically. So
Basically,
they are
that's right.
they are very different, but it's in the way that Scientology's been cloaked that makes it so hard to distinguish these things from the outside, which I
That's
find
right.
very
And
interesting.
yeah, exactly. In the end, it's not a super important argument whether Scientology is or isn't a valid religion. Whether they deserve tax exempt status is a very important argument. But the religious argument is kind of, it's already a done deal legally. There's nothing we can do to undo it.
Hmm.
And so it's really kind of a semantics game at this point.
Well, that's it. And this is also going back to the Dubs about what they were could be argued as a true believing religion, but what they are now as an organization, it would be easier to argue that they're not. They're more of just a money making scheme now. It's more about the real estate than anything else, and it's just trying to keep a following, to keep it looking legit.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So one of the big similarities I think that are really just blatantly obvious is the information control between them, the two groups. One
Yep.
of the main ones would be your internet access, for example. Is that something that, you know, you're free and clear to go on the internet or watch any movie or, anything like that?
No, of course not. All destructive cults have this in common. Information control is one of the 4 points that all of these groups have in common, and it's an important one because if you can control people's access to information, you can control what they do and don't know. And if you control what they do and don't know, or you control what it is that you're teaching them or their education, then you control how they think, which is another aspect of this, is the thought control. So information control leads right to that. And it also, in a way, influences emotional control, which is the other one of the other 4 factors. So, so this information control is key. And in Scientology, it's the one thing all Scientologists in common, no matter who they are or where they are, the one thing, one of these, the one information control point that is in common with them is do not ever look at anything in any medium that is critical of Scientology. Doesn't matter where you're seeing it, how you're seeing it, whether it's somebody else telling it to you even, I don't want to hear it, right? Literally, they will cover their ears.
Yeah.
rather than listen to something you have to say that's critical of the church. That extends to controls that go into place for high-level, committed Sea Org members, which is the Sea organization, which is the core, I guess you could say, clergy of Scientology. That's the word they use. It's not a great analogy, but it works. That's the part I was part of for 17 years, is the real high-level stuff. And at that level of Scientology, every aspect of your life is controlled by the church, because you're working 24/7 for the organization. So I did not have internet access. I had no internet, period, actually, until the very last couple of years when I was out and about and had to contact people and find them. So I needed to have skip tracing tools at my disposal. And so I had a limited degree of internet access. And even that was supposed to be very guarded and careful, and, no looking up anything about Scientology. So it's a very rigorous, kind of control system that they try to run.
Now, I know that it'd definitely be a different kind of setup for the organizations, but it's reminiscent somewhat to me of the Bethel, or if you've heard of Bethel for the Jehovah's Witnesses, where they will go and work, do their full-time thing. I think that's generally where they'll print out a lot of the literature and, factory workers.
Yes, I've heard of them, yeah.
And I just know that obviously because I've never been to Bethel, as far as I recall, the only people I've met who have been to Bethel were while I was still in, and I wouldn't take their word for a grain of shit. But,
Okay.
so I don't really know, all I can go off is a lot of
really
stories.
I'm not quite sure I was clear about that.
But, yeah, I know that couldn't be as bad as some of the stories that come out of the Sea Org, because I know that there are really, really horrific things that come out of that. But just the level of control in itself, like physical control even, your ability to go out, your freedom of relationships, your freedom of expressions, all of these things are so tightly controlled, and all you do is work for the organization. If you're paid not even minimum wage, it would be pittance,
That's right, $50 a week. It was good times. You eat what they feed you. You sleep where they tell you to, in dorms, dormitory style living mostly. Unless you get married, then you get a room, literally a room, not an apartment, a room. Common baths, common showers, uniforms, yes sir, no sir. I mean, this is it's a sort of paramilitary group that way. We had ranks and ratings and all kinds of fun stuff. So, I mean, I guess some people who are familiar with the structure or hierarchy of the Salvation Army might understand how you could have a civilian paramilitary group that has ranks and uniforms and, that kind of thing. That's how we worked as Sea Org members. And because Sea Org is C, not the letter C, but SEA, as in out on the ocean.
Out on the ocean.
And so it was kind of Navy-like, because Hubbard had been in the Navy, and he liked the Navy tradition, so he set up his own Navy, literally, and that's what the Sea Organization was.
Was it at one point, or if not maybe the origin of that, where he was out on a boat, and that's where he had his Sea Org on the ship, and they were sailing around in international waters because he was in trouble or some shit. So that's all correct.
That's exactly right. I
don't understand how people could get away with this. He's got such a ludicrous story, this guy. How does it happen?
here's the thing about cult leaders, because you could say the same thing about Joseph Smith and these other, these guys, Jim Jones, you wonder, but what they do is they push the boundaries of civilization or society way beyond any level that anybody ever imagined they'd be pushed. So when you have somebody, it's like a shark swimming amongst the goldfish, and all the goldfish are like, well, we're all just nice goldfish here, and they don't really see this thing that's a shark, and it's swimming around. That's kind of what these guys are like. They're larger than life personalities. They're often charismatic. They attract followers. They want followers. In fact, it's kind of a codependent relationship. They need followers. because you can't have a cult leader without them.
I,
So, you know, you need the followers.
So much of your description there just reminded me of a certain orangutan in America. Just
Oh,
so many points.
Well, you know,
we don't need to go there.
Just,
I know. Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah,
we won't piss anyone off.
Maybe we could move right on.
Hey, I'm an Australian. That was my opinion.
That's cool, man. You know, like we said before we got live, I got nothing to say about anybody else's government right now. I'm in no position to complain.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm in that great a position either. Anyway.
I will say this. I became very interested in politics in general, not because I'm at all interested in the positions of Democrats or liberals or the functioning of government or, you know, civil duties or I don't care really about a whole lot of that. I got my attention yanked into our presidential campaign and what's been happening in the White House since then because of my education in cults. So
really?
I look at Donald Trump and I see a malignant narcissist and a person who is willing to say and do anything to keep himself in power. And it's concerning. And that's the reason I got interested in it, not because I disagreed with his policies.
Well, that's fair enough. That's actually a fascinating reason to sort of come into it. I am getting a feedback. Is that on your side or mine?
I'm not experiencing feedback here.
Okay. It might have been. No, it's who cares? I'll ignore it. I'll step back. I'll move back a little bit so I'm not so loud. Now I've lost
I'll try to talk a little softer too. I get a little carried away sometimes.
No, well, I wasn't hearing you double back. I was only hearing my own voice, and I was like, I don't like hearing my own voice, even though it's filtered. So we're going into a few of the different control methods, and
yes.
I suppose we sort of minorly touched on physical controls when it comes to like the Sea Org or Bethel. What sort of going back to the more simple faithful people, your everyday Sunday preacher or whatever. I don't know what the equivalent would be for you, but how would you start to initiate a bit of doubt using some of these commonalities? Like if they've, let's say somebody at JW has just watched the Scientology Aftermath show and they're loving it, but they're not connecting it with their own faith. What would be something that you go, well, did you notice, something about the similarity that could initiate a bit of doubt? Like, is it something that you think is workable?
I do. I think mild, polite conversation in that direction is always helpful if it's done properly. And I'll stress mild, civil conversation for a reason. The number one mistake that I've run across with family and friends of people who are involved in cults is that they want to debate it, they want to argue it, they want to sometimes antagonistically tell the person or get across to them, somehow wake them up or get them to get that they are part of a cult, and that almost uniformly will not work. So when you have a situation where somebody, is being exposed to cult-like information and they're not connecting the dots to their own group, I think if you can direct the conversation to get them talking and you listening more, get them talking about their group, their involvement in the group. How do they feel about it? How are they doing with it? And once you get past the initial, it's all so wonderful, I love it so much. Once you get past that, the social veneer, you can find out, you have to ask sharp and pointed questions in a subtle manner, like in a very interested way. You got to really be interested. You really want them to talk to you. And if you're going to have a meaningful conversation with somebody, they have to open up. And they're not going to open up if you're attacking them.
Yeah.
So you have to be interested, honestly. And you have to find out what's their experience with the group? What is it about the group or the beliefs or the practices that appeal to them? Because they have all kinds of lines and talking points, I guess you could say, as to how they're supposed to talk to outside members and what they're supposed to say to them. But it's, nobody joins a cult.
No.
That's not what they think they're doing. Nobody does that, knowingly. They think they've become part of this amazing, wonderful group that has a line in to some kind of truth that they could not get without the existence and membership in this group. Mm-hmm. And they think that it's doing something for them in some fashion. So your job is to find out, what is it doing for them? And don't assume anything. You got to ask them, and you got to find out. And once you know that, then you know the basis on which they're part of this group at all. And then you can start finding out, well, how successful is this group at helping you to achieve X, Y, Z, whatever it is the person's there to achieve? And have you run into any problems and been any difficulties? Is there anything you found at all odd or strange about it or anything? And I would be even hesitant to use those words, but just a real open, meaningful, honest conversation about the subject. And it will often take more than one to get them to open up and feel like you're somebody who can be trusted to talk to about this stuff. But if you get them opening up like that, you'll have a chance at getting to what's underneath the social veneer stuff and where they're really sitting and what they're really troubled by, and why. And that is going to give you a lot of clues as to why they became involved in the cult in the first place. And that's the thing you're going to have to take the lever to unhinge. You know what I mean? To get them. Yeah, you're gonna have to snap them out of it. But in order to do that, you gotta be right on the right thing. And it takes work, man. It takes some real work to do this. And this is, again, as a friend or family member. I'm not talking about. This isn't the sort of thing that. This isn't what cult professionals do or counselors do. That's a kind of a different thing. If you're going to do an intervention, that's a whole different picture.
Different game. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, whole different thing. Interventions are a whole different ball game. This is just friendly discourse between two people.
Well, that's it. And I've sort of always thought that. I've just never, because I've always thought that I've only really been out of my own cult mindset for 8 months at max. So, I'm still pretty fresh. But having said that, I've spent years, even I knew who you were for years because I followed Scientology, and I loved following the just the fact that it was a cult. I was one of those people that wanted to, I loved the whole thing being exposed, still didn't connect it, still completely blind to it, and I'd left the religion. I wasn't a part of the Jehovah's Witnesses themselves. I just had my own belief still in Jehovah, and I was like that person that whenever somebody would call them a cult, I'm like, no, they're not a cult. You don't know what you're talking about. But then a lot changed very quickly, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, I was very wrong.
Right. Right. Well, and it's like that for all of us. All of us. I mean, it's not like I came out of working for Scientology and the next day, oh, I saw South Park, now it all makes sense. Okay, the last 27 years of my life.
If only it was that easy.
As if. I mean, it's not like that at all for anybody. Some people can't even deal with this sort of thing after they leave a group like this for years, even decades. I mean, I've seen that. People just they don't want to deal with it at all. They just want to kind of pack it up and put it in the closet and hope they never have to look at it again.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that too, especially for some who might have given a lot more to such an organization.
Big time. The level of commitment has a lot to do with how hard the recovery process is going to be, if there even needs to be one, so to speak. I mean, I'm not, I don't assert that every single person who comes out of a destructive cult has mental health issues or something. That's never been the message. But if issues come up, get some help, or find out about it. Get some education at least. Do something do something proactive to get on top of that, you know.
And as you said, it's not that, you know, you're definitely going to have mental health issues, but it's that there is a higher likelihood statistically, so it's best to look after yourself, make sure you're on top of it, as you say.
Exactly. It's not a matter of anyone, you know, the thing you really have to break out of after getting out of a high control group is is getting away from, you know, doing things other people tell you to do. And that means me too. You know, I'm nobody's guru, you know. So
No, that's
my advice is, you know, find out for yourself, get educated. I mean, that's always good advice.
I was going to say, it's probably the best advice you could give for almost any situation is do your own research, get well educated on whatever it is, you know, before you step out or before you go into it. You know, it's the same, it's what it drives me nuts when I see former Jehovah's Witnesses, and it will happen in all these sort of different denominations of places, that when they come out of one set of crazy, they just fall immediately into another set. You know, they just jump into another group and they fall for the same traps. You know, and it's just like, why? How did you not see that? Like, how? And you basically feel like you have to go and, you know, they're going to have to go through that whole thing again when they realize, oh, they've fallen for it again. You know, like, I don't understand how people can fall into it so many times. Like, what is that something that's common? Like, do people come out of Scientology and go, oh, I'm now going to be a Catholic or something, you know? Like,
Oh, sure, that happens, and I, you know, and I don't judge too harshly if they go off and get some religion, as far as some belief, but
yeah.
but I do know what you're talking about. Cult jumping is a thing that happens. I can't speak to a statistical figure of how often it happens, so I can't say it happens to most people. Hasn't been my experience that it happens to most, but it does happen, and the basic reason for it really does come back to that point of education. Just because you were in a cult doesn't mean when you come out of it that you've done an analytical analysis of why it was a cult and what it did to you. You know, sometimes people, like I said, just want to pack it up, stick it in the closet, and not think about it anymore. And I'll say by doing that, I think you're making a bit of a mistake. I understand the trauma and stress and PTSD that can be connected with some of these experiences. They are extremely traumatic and stressful for some people, given what happens to people in some of these groups. So I'm also not advocating for, okay, well, you know, just jump right into the counselor's chair. I'm saying, okay, rather than trying to write the whole thing off or go into some kind of a denial about it, perfectly understandable, but not necessarily the best thing to do, find out about what happened to you. There are now, in the age of information, in the internet age, we have ex-member groups all over Facebook, forums, websites. There's a wealth of information about high control authoritarian groups and what they do to you. And just, you know, read some books, read some blogs, look at some articles, maybe connected with your group, or maybe just the more general idea of, you know, cults or high control groups. What is coercive persuasion? What is cognitive dissonance? You know,
Yes,
these are terms I learned these things right away, and I went, oh, that's what was going on. You know, skepticism is always good to learn about. Critical thinking is really good to learn about, because these are things that give you honest, objective tools you can use to evaluate anything. And there's no agenda connected to critical thinking.
No.
There's no guru trying to sell you on how to be a better, you know, critical thinker. So,
and the best thing
in fact,
is,
that's the one thing they don't want you doing.
well, that's it. Sort of goes back to the cult mindset. It kind of combats almost all of the forms of control, information, thought, and emotional. Because if you have that education, you're not going to get caught up in that, and then you won't get caught up physically in it either.
Exactly.
That
reminds me also, yeah, the education is super, super important. If there was one thing, if there was one word if I only had one word to say to people coming out of any of these groups, JWs, Mormons, Hare Krishnas, Scientology, NXIVM, whatever, because it's not all just religious groups either, by the way.
No, of course.
It you know, that word would be education, because everything else springs from that. There was a point I wanted to make earlier too, when we were touching on information control and we were talking about Scientology, and I was talking about not access to the internet and the higher levels of the Sea organization. I wanted to make the point that lower level Scientologists also, while their whole life is not controlled by Scientology the way a Sea Org members is, they still get into a frame of mind of the church controlling their life. And that they're okay with that, that they think it's a good thing that that happened, and that they're willing participants in that control. And the reason for that, or the way that comes about, is because Hubbard actually directly talks in lectures and books about the subject of control. And one of the little zingers he throws in there is, if you can't yourself be controlled, then you have no hope of ever controlling anybody else.
Oh, that's an interesting way of doing
right?
it.
That's right. Little zingers like that, that you go, well, I think that sounds reasonable, and you don't think about it too much. And there it is, locked in there, this little idea that it's okay to control me, because if you do, if I let you do that, if I give over control to you, then really what I'm doing is taking a step on the road to being able to control everything in my own life. And funny enough, what happens is you give over control, and then they never let it go.
No,
they never give it back to you.
You lost it. Exactly.
And, you know, and the whole process of Scientology is a gradual, step-by-step indoctrination into them controlling your thoughts, your feelings, your attitudes, your emotions, and your bank account. And that is what that group is all about. You know, and there's a lot of steps involved there, and, you know, we could talk about it for a long time, but I wanted to make it clear that it's not just the high-level Sea organization that is under this sort of iron fist and a velvet glove sort of thing. At the Sea Org level, the velvet glove comes off, but it exists at all levels of Scientology.
And that's something that's so very different, for certain, about Scientology compared to the Witnesses, is that there's no expectation to pay anything in the Witnesses. I mean, like, there's a bit of, social pressure, you could say, but nobody's going to be watching you. Nobody's counting how many dollars you put in, and it's that's something that amazes me, that Scientology charges so much for their knowledge, in quotation marks, and that they can actually charge that. Like, it's just astonishing that there are people that will pay, and it's not even, the sad thing is, it's not just the super rich people that pay because they can afford it. It's people that will slave away or spend their last retirement savings on this shit for nothing, and God, that's just devastating, like, it's
tragic. It's absolutely tragic. I mean, in the future, we might write Greek tragedies about people who get involved in these groups, and in Scientology specifically, because Scientology has more control methods in it, I'm told, than any other high control group or destructive cult out there. And I believe it. I mean, knowing what all the things, all the landmines that exist in Scientology, I believe it.
It would be hard to beat, like, because even if you do find one that might have more controls, it wouldn't have as much of a power basis that Scientology has, like, such an influence over people. So there might be one that's, small cult in some random place, but, it'd just be that, a small thing, very secluded, not being very influential on people. Whereas, Scientology is rather large.
It is. That's exactly right.
Now, one thing I've heard, and I'm not really too sure on, do you know anything about what the Scientology's been doing here in Australia in the last few years, or is that outside of your world? Because I've sort of...
I'm
yeah, you're right.
I was just going to say I'm a little familiar with Scientology in Australia. I've done some study on it. I've interviewed Steve Kinane from Australia, is a reporter who works down there. He was working quite a bit on exposing Scientology for a number of years. Worked with Senator Xenophon on it.
Yes, that's right. I
Of
thought
course, my
that's who
son lives in
you were
Australia.
talking about. Yeah, in
What's
Perth.
that?
I was just trying to
Yes, that's
remember the
right.
reporter, and yeah, it took me a second to remember who it was.
Yeah, Steve. Yeah, he's a great guy, super nice guy, and he got to covering Scientology, and then he just couldn't let it go. It was just like ended up writing a book about Scientology's experience in Australia. There's a whole book about it,
Oh,
and it's
nice.
a really good book, by the way.
Because the reason I bring it up is that a few years back, maybe only 2 years back, I don't know, it might have been a few more than that now, but I was, I don't know what I was going to do, to be honest, but I was going to go in and check out the local Scientology place. Not obviously actually interested. I was more along the lines of what are they actually going to try and tell me? You know, like I sort of knew what I was going into, not expecting much. But literally, I thought, okay, I found their little the website where it says this is where they're located and they have a number. So all right, I'll give them a phone call. I gave them a phone call and somebody picked up. I'm like, sweet. So I had this little quick chat. Just basically, you know, I was wondering if I could just walk in, like, is it one of those things that, you know, do you have a specific date for something? And so he gave me the schedule. I'm like, cool. I'll probably be in a week or so. By a couple of weeks later, that place had been sold. It was unbelievable.
Oh wow!
It shut down, and I looked online, and the only article I could find is that they've sold a bunch of places around Australia, and the main group has now moved to Sydney, like a big base near Sydney, and there isn't so many scattered bases around the place. And I was wondering, is that true? Like, because I mean, it could just be
Not
that
that
one,
I heard.
you know?
No, I think it was just that one, and it sounds to me like they either moved, excuse me, or it was what was called a Scientology mission, which is not the same thing as a city level organization. We call them orgs for short. Nobody calls them churches. We call them orgs. That's the internal language of Scientology, which again speaks to its religiosity. But missions, which are lower level organizations,
just quickly,
they open and close all the time.
On the church thing quickly, it's the exact same with Dubs. Because we don't call them churches, they're kingdom halls, you know, and you don't go to church, you go to meetings, you know. Anyone that says church to us, you're like, what are you talking, you're obviously not a JW.
Right.
So I know
the language is important in these groups.
Yes, no, it really is.
It's part of the control.
Yeah. And
but as far as that, let me just say, as far as that group you were talking about goes, missions of Scientology are basically an individual Scientologist who pays the church about $30,000, $40,000 to get the right to deliver Scientology services in his area, and he has to open up an office building or a space where he can deliver, and he hires some people, and they get going, and those things open and close constantly. So that could have been the group you were.
Fair call, but I'm just. So some poor bugger paid, you know, whatever, 30, 40 grand to Scientology. Did he then also, Scientology obviously doesn't pay the rent for the place. I'm guessing he then had to pay for the rent for the office space.
He was responsible for all of it.
Bloody
all
hell.
On his shoulders. He's kind of like a missionaire, kind of, you know, he goes out and it's on him, man, and he makes it or breaks it. And that's what happens. The city level churches, like the one in Perth or Brisbane, or one over in New Zealand, or the one in Rome, or the one in Topeka, Kansas, those city level churches do get invested in by senior church levels if they need to, in order to keep them open. The policy of the church is that once a church is opened, a city level church like that, they never ever are allowed to close. True. So they'll do anything to keep those things open. When we start seeing city level churches closing, that's when we know it's really going in the tank, and that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I've just quickly looked up the Church of Scientology of Brisbane, and it's a different looks to be a different place than the one I remember looking up ages ago. But it's still, excuse me, it's still just a small like an office space, I suppose, in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I would have expected.
But that is a city level church. Brisbane is a city level church. That's not a mission. So
Yes.
they moved on you, but they didn't close.
Mother truckers. Wait, why am I censoring myself on my own channel? Motherfuckers. Oh, goodness. Oh,
There
well. No, it's a bit random, I know. It was just something I remembered about it, and I was wondering if that was a thing, I suppose.
Well, when people get curious about it, I tell them, look, if you want to know about it, go check it out. You don't have to take my word for it. Go down there, get creeped out. You'll see what I'm talking about. On the other hand, take some classes. I don't care. I mean, it's not like, if you want to do it, well, great, do it. All I'm trying to provide is education and experience from 27 years of being involved in it. And getting to its highest levels and knowing I've been way behind the curtain. I mean, I didn't just, see the wizard. I in some respects, I was the wizard in some ways. So, I already know the game and I try to warn people off of it. But at the same time, go check it out. Have fun.
At least you're giving people that warning that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise before going in, and they'll get duped. Whereas at least if they want to go in being educated in what they're going into, that's their call. That's fine. That's personal choice. But if you're going in not knowing what you're getting into, then it's like taking away your consent, basically. That's what
Scientology's going to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, what's going to happen if you walk into one of these places? And this is not just Scientology. Again, I'm espousing principles here that are fairly universal for destructive cults, whether they're religious or not. I mean, there are sports clubs. I mean, there's martial arts dojos that act like destructive cults. There's political groups that act like these groups. So the mechanisms are all the same, though. And one of those mechanisms is when you first come in and get on board, they're purposefully and knowingly deceiving you to some degree. They're not telling you everything that's going on. You're not involved in a situation where they're giving you informed consent. And there's going to be a lot of gotchas that are going to start coming. And it's the smart person who keeps their head above the clouds enough to, or out of the clouds, I should say, enough to recognize those gotchas when they happen, and be aware of that kind of thing. Because you can be lulled into a false sense of security by, a lot of techniques that are used by these groups, like love bombing, we call it, where they're just super nice to you.
First thing you'll get when you walk. Yeah.
Yeah, these people aren't mean. They're not nasty. These are wonderful people. These people aren't abusing me. I'm not being beaten up here.
No,
well,
exactly.
Yeah, of course you're not. You're on day one, man. Come on. What do you expect? I mean, that stuff doesn't happen on day one. It doesn't happen on day 50. That stuff doesn't happen until you're fully into the group, When
they know you've committed yourself.
Yeah. So, keep your wits about you, no matter what.
It's a tough thing to sort of juggle if you are going to go into it knowing what you're going into.
Yeah. Frankly, they're losing members like a sieve right now. I mean, nobody's really going in there and stuff. I say, if you want to do so, but arm yourself, only because I'm not your guru. So I'm not going to tell people what to do with their lives. That's not my role in life. So that's why I say that.
A lot of us, at least, that's sort of a reasoning behind getting out of the groups we did, because we didn't want to be in those positions. Like, think of a mate of mine, he's named the Godless Iowan. He was a Pentecostal preacher, and now he's turned atheist, online atheist. And one of his things was couldn't go back to that. It's such a change. I might have to. I'm getting some noise in the background, so just give me a second. No.
Mm.
Every now and then things move around and I have to get ready on the old mute button. Oh, now I brought up Iwan and I was going to go into something else with him too and I've forgotten because I got distracted. But anywho, I thought I'd ask the chat, the side chat, if there are any questions for Chris, Nadine. Have you had any coming in yet?
Oh, yes, lots of questions.
Oh, we have questions.
We have lots of questions. Yay! Okay.
I got plied with so many questions that that's why I started my Q&A show that I do every week.
Yeah,
and I've done
that's a great show.
Wow.
I've done 175 of these episodes, answering 8 to 10 questions each episode. So it's amazing to me how many questions there are on these topics, and I love it. I think it's great.
It is wonderful. So, Beach Price asks, wouldn't Scientologists just view all other religions as part of that programming?
Well said.
Yes, they would. Yes, they would. Only high-level Scientologists would think that. The Xenu thing is only about 5% of Scientologists make it to that level. So generally speaking, no, most Scientologists aren't going to think about the Xenu programming, or implants is what it's called in Scientology. But they're still going to think that other religions are authoritarian control systems that are mainly coming, depending on how aware they are as a Scientologist, like how involved they are as a Scientologist, I should say. They might think of religions as past life implants or control measures, and if they don't, if they haven't gotten into the whole past lives thing yet, then they'll just think religions are just, bad for you in general, and Scientology is the good one. And that's kind of how they think of it.
Cool. Next question is from a pasta babe, Linda James. Chris, what are some of the social norm mistakes that you've made when you first left, and the consequences, good and bad?
Social norm. Oversharing was a real problem for me for a long time, because in Scientology you're not allowed any secrets ever about anything. So I was in the habit of telling everybody everything about my life, and I had to learn to put some filters in place. That kind of I had to learn about the concept of boundaries. That was a huge revelation. Like, what? These things exist. What are you talking about, boundaries? It took me the longest time to get my wits around that idea. So that created some awkward conversations from time to time.
I'll bet.
I wasn't brutally honest or something. It's not like I was over evaluating or insulting other people. I was just talking too much about
oversharing. Yeah.
My crap. So that was kind of the problem. And then the other thing, which I've actually been battling for quite a while, is dealing with disagreements. Dealing with the idea that just because I have an idea about something, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way to think about a thing, or that somebody and I can coexist with a disagreement and it's kind of okay. Especially on social media, there's a number of reasons for that. But I think in thinking about it a lot and looking at it in my own personality, it has to do with the fact that I came from years of feeling like I had all the answers in Scientology, because Scientology is the science of certainty. That's what Hubbard called it. So you're absolutely certain that you know all this stuff and there's no other answer to it. And that's a hard habit to break. And I've caught myself at it over and over and over again. And it's something I work on a lot, because I think it's important as a critical thinker to, you got to be open to other ideas and to other ways of looking at things. And you got to be okay with the fact that some questions might not have a one right answer kind of situation. And it's okay for other people to think other things, and you can still coexist,
I can sympathize with that, because it's the same kind of thing with the dubs. Obviously, it's the truth, and all the answers, And so coming out of that, it's you always really have to do a double take on yourself and your own opinions. You know, like step it down a level when other people have other opinions. They're just as valid as your own. You know, like got to catch myself.
Exactly. I won't. Yeah, because I won't give on facts. I mean, if I've got an objective fact in front of me, look, man, that's the fact, right? But opinions, I mean, come on, let's chill out. You know?
Yeah.
That's where it's been. Yeah.
Okay, so Mediocrity's Maze says, without I'm sure this is more of a rhetorical question, but it's funny, so I'm asking it anyway. Mediocrity's Maze says, without Scientology, who will pay for Tom Cruise's platform shoes?
Right.
Sorry, okay, on to the next question. Southern Boz Lady says, Chris, if you will be on any of Leah Remini's episodes. I told her that you were, but I couldn't remember which ones they were.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you can expound on that.
Yeah, no problem. I was on season 1, episode 5 was the number, but it wasn't. Season 1 had a bonus episode that was a Q&A episode. It was a Reddit AMA. And when they did that first Reddit AMA episode, they called me out to LA, and I got to be part of that. I got to talk to Leah and Mike and answer some questions and stuff. So that was the one I was on. So it was the first Reddit AMA episode of season 1. And and then I got to serve as a consultant on season 1 and season 2 behind the scenes also, which was fun.
Cool. And the next question is, Josiah Hansen asks, Chris, what is your favorite Ninja Turtle? He asked this of everybody, so I had to ask him.
I will say Donatello.
Donatello.
Random.
I like that.
Okay, I'll let him know. He'll be disappointed. He says Michelangelo is the correct answer.
I almost said Michelangelo, but then I defaulted to Donatello.
So, okay, next question is Fenrir the God Eater says, Chris, what do you think is the wacky? Yeah. What do you think is the wackiest concept of Jehovah Witnesses?
I think our JWs are the ones who believe that you're going to die and just basically be in your grave until Judgment Day, right? Until everybody comes out of the graves and lives again.
Pretty much.
Is that?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was a little weird. I think in terms of wackiness, I thought that belief was a little weird. In terms of their actual practices, I think the two witness rule thing is for the birds when it comes to actual justice for people, and that's the one that actually disturbs me the most.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that one.
Cool. Yeah, it's same here. So, next question, Mark Caesar says, Chris, how long do you think religions have before they die now that we have the internet and can access the lies of religion as easy as we can?
Yeah, tough question. Because what you're fighting there are some very primal instincts that we have. Religion didn't just come along because some evil guy one day went, twirled his little mustache and said, I think I've got a good idea of how to control other people. There are urges and primal instincts we have to get questions answered that we don't have the answers to. So without those answers, people are going to look and dream up answers, and that's a lot of where religious ideas come from. And so what we really need is a lot more than just information dissemination through the internet, which is really helping a lot. But we also need very solid answers to the questions people have about things that they really don't know right now, and which science is not even approaching, which is supernatural experience, what happens after you die, where did we come from? I mean, science is zooming as fast as it can to get these answers, but it doesn't have them yet. So I think we're going to need those before we're going to really be able to close the door on religion as a whole.
Otherwise, it'll still just be a combative effort, one against the other, sort of like it is now. Each side will get stronger, but we'll still be fighting a losing battle until we have the science to back it up.
That's right. And we just don't have that right now. We can't answer those questions. We're not even kind of close in a lot of ways.
Yep.
But we're working on it.
So, next question. Yes, we are. Next question is Pasta Babe. Linda James says,
Oh,
not
Pasta Babe,
this
I
one.
love that.
Yeah. Not. She has it's a question for NotJah actually. What was the
Oh.
last straw thing that made him say you're done with the org of JWs? Do your parents know of your choice, and how did that affect the family bond?
That is a lot in a single, a lot to explain in a single question. I suppose in short, there was enough doubts in my mind when I was working towards becoming a baptized brother at a young age. Then the elder who was guiding me through said some really silly things, and I realized that he didn't know what he was talking about, therefore the organization don't really know what they're talking about, because he was just parroting them. So I think I was about 12, I left the actual organization itself, but I kept my beliefs. So from there, I didn't have to go to like meetings and whatnot anymore, or go witnessing. But my faithful family, my father isn't. He is sort of just don't want to know, don't give a shit, don't care about religion, about anything. Not my business. I go to work and I pay the bills. That's all I do. That's who he is. So it's like the other side of the family sort of had to just live with it. They didn't really, there was no kicking me out because I wasn't baptized. So my mother has got the optimism and the spirit to try and bring me back. And I don't think they know that this recent transition has happened though, which is in February when I lost my faith completely and all of my beliefs, and I realized that it was a cult. And that was sort of a accumulation of YouTubing, finally letting myself watch the videos and the creators who were actively going against the witnesses. Because as I said, I used to get right into Scientology, exposés, and all sorts of other religions. As a Jehovah's Witness, you go out witnessing to people, exposing their religions. You're trying to deconvert them from their religion and into your own. So I always knew all the downsides to other religions. I just never knew them about my own. So it all just clicked, and I was like, it's all one big load of shit, So that's about February this year, somewhere there, when I started my channel.
Oh. So the next question was from Mark Caesar. Chris, do you think Scientology is more immune to the information revolution than other religions?
Yes, because of the control factors that are put on the members to not read anything critical about Scientology and avoid it like the plague. The brainwashing there, and I use that as a very loose term. I mean, it's not any kind of technical term. But let's just say the mind control is very strong. It's obviously not been strong enough to keep, a ton of members from leaving over the last 8-9 years. So, on the people who are looking at the internet, who are watching Going Clear, who do look at Leia's show, they tend to take a step out, and then they take another and another. And I think David Miscavige might be a little upset. He's the current leader of Scientology, to learn how many people are in Scientology right now who aren't really in. They just have to say they are so that they don't lose their family.
Very, very similar to the
There's
Dubs.
an awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's exactly all these groups, the shunning principle. So
Yes.
I think they'd be a little surprised at how many of them are not really true believers anymore.
Cool. Yeah, it's being isolated from your family, I can't even imagine.
Oh.
Next question is from Duke Bonanza. Chris, do you know anything about Leah Remini's court case against Scientology?
I'm going to have to say no, because I didn't know she had a court case against Scientology.
I'll admit I didn't know that
I
either.
know she's got a TV show.
Yeah.
She said at the end of, I think it was at the end of season 1, beginning of season 2, they were going into this next season, and they had gone and talked to some lawyers.
Yes.
And that is, whatever's going on with that, I am not privy to. But I am not aware of her having actually filed any case against Scientology as I sit here right now. However, watch season 3, because I'm also told that there's going to be some amazing things in season 3, and maybe some of them might be of a legal nature. So that's probably coming probably early next year. We'll see.
Okay, cool. So next is Beach Price asks, have you ever been to the Museum of Psychiatry?
Yes. Yes, I have. The Psychiatry and Industry of Death Museum. It's on Hollywood Boulevard. I actually helped build some of that place. When I was in the Sea Org on the prison detail, I was making furniture, and some of that furniture was in that building. Yeah, it's quite something. Scientology really, this is one of the unique things that Scientology offers, is a hatred of psychiatry. And absolutely, they want to eradicate. There is no coexistence. It is eradicate, destroy, annihilate. These are the words they use to describe what Scientology wants to do to psychiatry. They think that psychiatrists are the single sole reason why everything on this planet is as insane as it is. I mean, that they think, of course, they don't like the government, and they don't like government leaders and authoritarians and stuff. Those guys have blame too. But the psychiatrists are really the bad guys. And they want to do anything they can to convince people that psychiatry is the most evil force on planet Earth.
That is a...
Yep.
I remember hearing the history of that too. One quick question I have on that is, do they hold the same feeling towards psychology? Because a lot of the times those two
pretty much
put into the same. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Psychology is not excluded from that. Hubbard extensively used the word psychiatry more so than psychology. Scientologists think of psychologists as psychiatry light. You know, they're like, oh, psychologists are just full of it. They have nothing workable, nothing that they're doing helps anybody. But psychiatry is the actual, they're the murderers. They're the brain choppers. They're the lobotomizers. They're the guys who, you know, will give all of your kids drugs. They don't care about your kids. They're just going to drug them up because they're in league with Big Pharma to make money and destroy the planet. And they know what they're doing, and they're doing it with malice aforethought. That's their view on that. Yeah.
Of course. And to that, Beige says, oh my gosh, he actually helped make it. Yikes.
I know. It's not like I say that with pride, okay?
So next question is Bad Tempered Badger asks, what's the deal with the aliens?
Oh, God.
All right, this is actually a pretty simple explanation. Here's the deal. If you buy into one very specific idea, everything else rolls from it. The one idea you buy into in Scientology, and it's a very simple idea, is that you are an immortal spiritual being who has lived a near infinite amount of time in the past, and you will live forever into the future. Once you buy that idea, past lives, of course there's past lives, because you've been around forever. If life on this planet, life predating this planet, life on other planets, sure, why not? You've lived forever. There's, quadrillions of years in the past, according to Scientology, not millions, not billions, like our scientists say. No, Hubbard says there's quadrillions of years in the past. So in all that time, you've lived millions and billions and trillions and quadrillions of lives. And you're going to, so obviously some of those lives were not going to have happened on planet Earth, which means you were an alien.
I was actually just thinking, even
course.
if you go back millions or billions of years, you're not going to be a human either. You're going to be whatever other, not quite evolved, back then. I can't fucking think of the way you explain
Well,
it.
Hubbard eventually said that evolution itself was a myth and an implant, and that it never really happened that way. That there's other
Right.
ways that
No,
evolution
of course.
occurred, and
Of
that
course.
bodies, these kind of bodies, the human bodies, have been around for way longer than you think. So, yeah.
Ah.
But yes, there
Tricky,
have been
tricky.
other body kinds and types, and there have been invader forces. Hubbard talks about cat people, and he talks about aliens that had like big claws for hands. And I mean, it's science fiction, man. He was a science fiction writer. Of course, he's going to talk about this stuff.
H.P. Lovecraft. It
Gotta
just
love him.
reminds
That's
me
so
of
crazy.
his stories. I love
That's right.
Lovecraft.
Right. But it all stems from that idea that you are an immortal spiritual being. Because once you buy that idea, anything's possible. Anything.
It works the same way, again, going back to the similarities with the Dubs, because they work almost their entire religion off, I think it's the 1914 belief, and they've done this weird calculation to get to the year of 1914 when Jesus comes back, and that sort of is the basis of all of their belief. And even that they have to sort of reconfigure every now and then just to keep up with the fact that time is still going and we haven't hit the new system, like their new paradise. And it's just ridiculous though. Like, it all hinges off something so simple, and even then when you take a step back you go, that's kind of just a load of shit. Like, how can you believe that? Like, and then
Yeah.
the crazy piles on top of that, of course. Like, you can make up anything once you buy it. You've bought it. Like,
Exactly. These groups are an amazing exercise or demonstration in just how far you can stretch people's imaginations and credulity and get them to still claim that they really believe in this stuff. It's really amazing.
I think it has a lot to do with a person's ego, because in a lot of ways it always has something to do with either a supreme knowledge or an ability to continue your life, further than what is mortal. And so it seems to always be about an ego trip, to the people at its core. It might not be the, conscious level that you're thinking about it that way, but there's always some gain, and there's always some, I want to be that one step above the other person. I want the truth, like, whereas everyone else doesn't. I know the truth, or I have the real religion, or I have the real knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very much part of it. You mix in with that some zealotry and some interpretation of experience, subjective experience, and you get religious fervor, and that's where that comes from.
Oh, that's great answers. So next one's Jen with one N asks, how many people leave when they get to level 3 and find out about Xenu? Like, this is too nuts, I'm out.
Not as many as you would think. It happens, but again, not as many as you think. And again, only 5% of Scientologists are actually getting to that level. So we're not talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I mean, right now, planet-wide, we're talking about maybe 35, 40,000 Scientologists total. So, I wouldn't really want to give a number to that answer. I would just want to say some have. But by the time you're that committed and you're that, invested, you buy into it.
One question I actually have is, would you have to be at that level to work at the Sea Org, or is that something you could be? No?
Nope.
Yep. Okay.
Nope, I never made it to that level.
Okay.
I found out about Xenu and all that stuff after I got out.
Oh, true. Wow,
Yeah, 27 years in, and all I got was clear, and then even that got taken away. That's an intermediate step between, low life scumbag non-Scientologist and Xenu believer. Is the state of clear.
Now you'd be an SP, wouldn't you?
That's right. Now I'm an SP.
Yeah.
Yay! yay! We're
Yeah, I
the
said yay for us.
That's right.
Well, it's a cooler club anyway. All the cool people are SPs.
That's right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mark Caesar asks, Chris, were you worried about being outed in everything by the Scientologists when you left?
Being outed?
Oh, like
Yeah.
when they come out after you, like with all, secrets and stuff like that, they'll expose and they'll slander you on the
Yeah,
phone.
yeah, I think that's what he's asking.
Yeah. No, I wasn't. I actually made a conscious decision when I got out and started speaking out. Before I started speaking out publicly, I made a very conscious decision that the Sea Org was not going to, or Scientology was not going to, blackmail me. I didn't have any secrets I was going to be ashamed of or afraid to confess to or be concerned about. And so far that continues to be true. And they don't have any deep, dark secrets to come after me with. They took their best shot in a website that they had made for me after I was on Leah's show. And that best shot was my ex-wife complaining about me.
Yeah,
so,
I got to admit,
well, guess what? She's my ex-wife. Of course she's going to complain about me.
I have checked out a lot of...
We got divorced because we had complaints, Like,
I have looked.
Okay,
I've looked at a lot of those websites that they've made, and they are some ridiculous websites. Hey? Like, I don't know how
really
anyone
is.
could.
Scientology does not realize how ridiculous the world thinks they are. So,
they are a bit of a laugh, though.
Sorry,
like, you can't lie.
ridiculous.
For us on the outside of, especially on the outside of all of the ingoings of Scientology and people having directly come out like yourself, it's such a like complete opposite thing. You're seeing you guys on all these docos, and the good work is like exactly how you do what you do. And I mean, like Leah, she's always like self-exposing herself. Like she's opening up and going, look, you can come at me with anything. This is, she's already in Hollywood, so everyone sort of already is going to pick her apart for everything. So what are you going to do? And it's just such an opposite thing. When you read those websites, it's laughable. It is completely laughable. Even having never known you, you could laugh it off going, they are so full of shit,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, here's, and I'll just give you an example of something really, really stupid, is they write on the website that my son doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And last year, I go visit him. I throw pictures. I mean, we're Facebook friends. I got pictures of him on my Facebook wall. I mean, that's an obvious lie. And it's so easy to disprove. So,
but I mean, hopefully, the good thing in my mind, hopefully, is that the majority of people that are going to find those websites are normally people looking for you guys, not like, or the TV show, like they're going to look up Leah Remini's TV show and it'll direct them. They'll hit the wrong link and they'll go. They're going to already know. They're not going to suddenly read the website and go, oh, I didn't know this, and have a different opinion. Like, it's so ridiculous. It's petty.
Exactly.
Okay,
Anyway.
so great answers. Anyway, Bad-Tempered Badger asks, yo, how much money did it cost overall to be part of the cult?
Well, I worked for the organization for 25 years, so I didn't have to pay money and I didn't have money to pay because they weren't paying me anything.
Because they weren't, yeah, exactly.
So
what
I gave
literally
was time.
with your lifetime. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it was no big. It was only 25 years of my life.
I got to admit, dude, 25 years is a life sentence in my country. That's what you get for committing murder, and that's what they took of your life. That's fucking bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't fun. I'm not saying it was. Monetarily, a person going up to the highest levels of Scientology, which is OT, operating Thetan level 8, it could expect to pay minimum $750,000.
God, fucking.
So, and most pay way more than that, way more.
Because you'd get people that would do the
there
same
are price
ones
lists,
over and over again too.
There's money you have to pay, so it's
oh my lord,
pretty bad.
So Jen with one end asked, do recovering Scientologists have some place to seek help? Like, are they included in the Recovering from Religion Foundation, or is there a specific foundation for them?
Yes, it's called the Aftermath Foundation. And you can look that up. There's a website. It operates out of Florida. I am friends with the board members. It is something that is there for anyone to reach out to. I think it's aftermath.com, aftermathfoundation.com. Actually, I'll just check that right now while I'm talking.
.org. So I have .org, and it might be the wrong one. So
yeah, looking it up. No, that's not it. That is not Aftermath Surviving Psychopathy Foundation. Let me see here.
Yeah.
Aftermath Foundation. I'll just look it up this way. See if I can. Yeah, there it is. It's the aftermathfoundation.org. My bad.
Yep.
So that is the website, theaftermathfoundation.org, and anyone coming out of Scientology at any level can contact them and be directed to some assistance.
Cool. I just linked that one in the chat for everybody.
Great.
Yeah, I was just about to do. Ben with one N also asks, is it true that the higher ups will take your passports so you can't leave the country?
That is not it's not a higher ups, actually. It's a lower downs. It's pretty common practice at the lower levels of the C organization, not public Scientologists or staff members. But when you get to that high level, then you're fully committed and every aspect of your life is controlled. So yeah, of course they're going to take your passports because they don't want you going anywhere. When you go to the Free Winds, which is the name of their cruise ship down in the Caribbean islands, they sail around on the ABC Islands. They also confiscate the crew passports there, and I'm not sure if they take the passengers. I think because I've never heard of any passenger having a problem down there, but the crew definitely. They've held people hostage on that ship. That's for sure.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mark Caesar asks, Chris, what is the point of living multiple lives if you can't remember them? Might as well be dead and not have another life.
That's the reason why you need to do Scientology. Because Scientology will free you from the amnesia of the experience of life after life after life. That's the point. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Gotta think about this, man. That's what it's all about.
Obviously,
See, Mark.
he's not clear.
The reality is that is the reality. That is what we're all doing. We're all living life after life after life, and we can't remember shit from one to the next because you get amnesia after you die. So
makes sense.
Scientology busts that open, and so you don't have to keep forgetting because you conquer the mechanisms that make you forget, amongst many other things that you conquer by doing Scientology.
Of course. Makes sense. Absolutely.
I have a question now, actually, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chris, did you ever meet David Miscavige?
Yes, I was in the same room as him 3 times.
What because I've obviously heard everything that's said in all the docos and everything publicly like that, and I've seen the interview he did. I can't remember who interviewed him, but back in the 90s, I think
Ted
it
Koppel
was.
on Nightline?
I think that was, yeah, because I'm pretty sure I only did one.
Yep, he did he's only done one on video that we know of. He has done other interviews, but I think that was the only, maybe one other video one, but that's the most famous one for sure.
Well, that's the one I'd heard of. What is your personal experience with him?
Well, when I was in the same room with him, and the various times that I was at the receiving end of briefings or questions from him. So I was in a state of absolute terror of the man. but I didn't know to use that word. It's only in hindsight that I can actually describe it that way. At the time, I thought I was nervous, fearful, but respectful. I thought that this is what respect felt like.
Yeah.
I've since learned, no, it's very different feeling. So, because I couldn't interpret how I was feeling in a negative way, that would have been, sacrilegious in a way. So I had to interpret it in using words that made sense. So I respect, but he was intense. He's a very, very intense guy. He's very stage mannered, very stage, he's got a lot of stage presence and personal charisma. Kind of magnetic in a way. It's very intense stare. He does that on purpose. It's not an accident. And that's what he was like.
I was thinking with the eyes, it's a very dominating presence. That's a direct way of getting to people. Especially being he's not exactly the most how do I put it? Of small stature.
Yeah, he's tiny, man. He comes up to about here.
I was actually going to ask you to do that. I didn't want to ask.
Yeah, no, he's small. But here's the other thing. He's always got an entourage with him. He's always got backup.
Yeah.
A lot of it. I mean, the security guys. We had security guys. He's got bodyguards. This kind of thing. He has no reason to be afraid of you, no matter how big you are. So he lets it all out at you, knowing that you're not going to be able to do a thing about it. And that kind of power is pretty freaky. If he were to, if I were to see him now, I would not have that same reaction. None of the baggage that I had carried around with me at that time is still with me. I'd probably pop him in the face, so that's my take on him now.
Any of that, being the figure who he is, and when you're in, is that something that adds to the stage presence, so to speak, like that ability to own the room? Because if he walked into another room of people nothing to do with Scientology and he didn't have his big entourage, he would just be another short guy walking into a room.
Exactly, which is why he won't do that. That's why he hides. That's why he won't come out and talk to any reporters or make himself known or come out and face any music. He'll never do that because he doesn't control the situation or the environment. And he only travels and comes out in situations where he is the master of the environment. And so that's why, he's never gonna come out and answer any questions, go into any depositions, show up in court. I mean, none of that stuff. He'll never will.
So, it's a very, very hypothetical. Let's say he was, for whatever reason, I don't know what the right word is at the moment, but is it indicted? Like, asked to be brought through court, found guilty, charged with something. Would they,
sure.
He wouldn't have any, like, he wouldn't be the sort to do a crazy recourse. I'm thinking the sort of insane things that other cultish people in places can, what's that group, Waco and that, when that sort of thing threw up, would that be something likely or nothing?
I don't see him doing that.
No.
I don't see him doing that. I think he would have a heads up on anything that would be coming his way. And I think because Scientology has inroads with the police and with federal agencies and stuff, they just know
it's coming. Yeah.
And they buy influence and they get it. And he would know it. I think unless it was completely out of nowhere, he'd have some idea it was coming. And I think he's the kind of person who would run. That's what I think he would do. I don't think he's the kind of person who would
be able to justify it. He'd be able to justify it with that the Sea Org originally, as we were talking about, how they did a bit of a runner in the international waters, so he could fall back on that being a precedent.
Oh yeah, if he needed to, without any question whatsoever, he could land on the free winds down in the Caribbean, and that boat, which is basically a very large yacht. I mean, it's a cruise ship, but it's a really tiny one. They'd sail wherever. They'd go out on the ocean blue. They would go out and you'd never hear from them again, kind of thing. I mean, you would. They'd track him down. But I'm just saying he would try something like that, I think, before he would try to take a stand in a courtroom.
Yeah. Far out.
I think. That's my conjecture.
Of course. Yeah, no, of course. You can only really speculate on stuff like this.
Right.
Nadine, sorry, any other questions? We might, like...
Yeah, there's still 7-8 more questions and a few comments. I'd like to get to the comments
probably
first.
stop asking them to bring in the questions, though, because otherwise we'll never end the show.
That is true. That will happen, yeah.
There's a few noteworthy comments that I've come across, so
Go for it.
bring your attention to them. Southern Boss Lady says, "Yay, Chris Shelton and Rachel Bernstein helped me to see the JWs are a cult. Even though they did not mention the JWs, they list the things to look out for, and then I put the pieces together."
Oh, that sounds so... That's
awesome.
That's awesome.
That's great.
So
great.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And Apostate Babe, Linda James, says, "Please let Chris know that when I wanted to learn how to think critically, I Googled critical thinking and I found him, and he helped me immensely. And so I found Rachel Bernstein. Thank you."
Awesome. You're very welcome.
And then Jen with one N. Absolutely. I quite enjoy your work, and it's everything I've watched is great. Jen with one N says, "I went off on the Dianetics pop-up booth this past Black Friday at the mall, selling their personality tests."
Good.
So I'm
take it to the man. Take it to him, man.
That's the spirit.
And just so we're totally clear, I am joking. I don't want anybody going around punching a Scientologist. Okay, please don't do that.
Oh no,
you got to say these things out loud, or people infer stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So, next question is Clade, Starfish. Hubbard was okay, my pronunciation's bad deal. Hubbard was obviously a sci-fi writer. How does Scientologists reconcile that it was clearly all science fiction, or do they ever address it?
No, they don't address that. Hubbard was a writer across a number of fields, not just science fiction. He wrote mystery, romance, westerns, adventure, nonfiction, fiction. The guy is one of the most prolific authors ever. I mean, you can say that for him. He wrote, and he wrote a lot.
That is one thing he did do. He's got a lot
and
books.
I think I think he's also one of the most translated authors in the world, if not the most translated.
I have heard that. Not sure if it's true, but yeah.
No, it's true. No, it's true.
Okay.
I think there were 1 or 2 Guinness records awarded on that.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it's legit. But I mean, what he wrote was crap. Okay. So let's be clear about that. Okay. He just happened to write a lot of it.
Wait, he didn't get his Guinness record for quality.
There's no. It was, and even when I was a Scientologist, I couldn't read his fiction. I hated it. It was so bad. So he wrote a lot of stuff. So as far as Scientologists go, though, there's no dot connecting between, well, gee, he was a fiction writer, and now he's writing this stuff, because Hubbard comes from a time, and this is really kind of important to remember, and a lot of people don't get this, is Hubbard comes from a time where a lot of science fiction and a lot of stuff and a lot of authors came out of science. I mean, Robert Heinlein was an engineer of some kind. Arthur C. Clarke. A lot of these guys had professional degrees or science degrees and wrote. And so Hubbard didn't have those kind of degrees or credentials to fall back on, but he knew all those guys. They were all of the same class, so to speak. So it wasn't that weird that somebody with a writing background would enter into a philosophy or a science. And that's how Hubbard did his thing. So if you want to know how Scientologists reconcile that, I just told you.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And Beach Price asks, so where do members think Hubbard is now, or is it taboo to wonder?
Nah. I mean, nobody knows specifically because he's off to do further research. Hubbard didn't the specifics of his death, how he died, where he died, what happened, all of that is buried. No Scientologist knows that stuff. As far as they're concerned, there was an event that took place in the Palladium Theater in Hollywood about 3 or 4 days after he died, and David Miscavige and other people went on stage and said that he voluntarily, causatively left his body. Didn't have a stroke, didn't have a heart attack, didn't have anything bad happen to him. He causatively left his body to go and do further research on higher spiritual states of awareness. So Scientologists have this vague idea that at some point in the future he might return, but they're also told falsely that he left all these upper level materials for them to do, which haven't even been released yet. And they're working to try to get Miscavige to release those levels, which, by the way, don't exist even, but they think they do, so that they can achieve these high spiritual states, just like L. Ron Hubbard did before he voluntarily left his body and took off. So.
And that, am I right in remembering that he said something about he's finished his current research in this realm or something like that? Like he'd decide, like he'd come to this conclusion, and now that's why he's going off to do the further research. And of course, it was of his own accord. Like he couldn't be taken down by any mortal means. Like,
no, that would be the only thing that no Scientologist could be allowed to believe, is that he died of causes that were outside of his control, because that would speak the lie to everything Scientology is about.
Yeah.
So they kind of have a vested interest in believing that.
Okay. Bad Temper Badger asks, Chris, when they do the "What are your crimes" thing, do they always stick to the script as closely as in the videos I've seen? Almost word for word every time?
They used to. They don't do that a whole lot anymore. Scientologists are like the ones who are trusted to do that. Because let me be clear, not all Scientologists do that. Not all Scientologists even know to do that or are trained to do that. So what you see in those videos are a minority of Scientologists who have been entrusted by the Office of Special Affairs, which is Sea Org members who work in the Intelligence Bureau of Scientology. Yes, it's Intelligence Bureau, as in, covert operations. Yeah, it's really like that. So you have these Sea Org members who work in that office, and they train people in how to deal with critics by confronting them in the street and telling them what's your crimes, and there is a drill to it, and there is words and that kind of thing. So you see that, but they don't really get out and do that much anymore because they've been exposed for what they do, and it looks ridiculous and it sounds ridiculous because it is ridiculous.
Because it is.
And they know it. They know that it doesn't reflect well on them. I should say that. They believe in what they're doing, but they know it doesn't look good. So when it was not done on camera and when it wasn't all over the internet, it was a good thing to do. But now that it's exposed, we look crazy, so we can't be doing that anymore. So that's why you won't run into that too much. If you have your, phone out and you're filming as they're doing it, you'll see that they will stop doing it and they'll just walk away from it.
Yeah. So, Bad Pimp Badger also asks, I've watched a few videos of them trying to discredit detractors. They always seem to follow an almost identical script. I think
it's the same one, isn't it?
I don't know. Same sort of question, in the same vein, I guess. So I guess that was already answered. Jen with one N asks, how far-reaching is the influence of Scientology in covering up its members' law-breaking, like celebrities like Danny Masterson?
Yeah, pretty intense. Pretty good. They're pretty good at what they do in covering things up. And we'll see what happens with Danny Masterson's case. It's been being investigated for 2 years now. That's an awful long time, considering how long it took Harvey Weinstein to be perp walked out of his office building in New York.
Yeah.
So Danny Masterson has deserved that perp walk for a long time, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's got 4 women accusing him of multiple instances of sexual assault. So allegedly, he is guilty of these things. And Scientology has worked overtime with their connections with the LAPD, and they do have connections with the LAPD to keep that quiet. But ultimately, it's up to the DA, and I don't personally know whether they have lines into the DA office the same way they have lines into the police forces. So I don't know as far as that goes, but I do know that it's dragged out for 2 years, and that's a ridiculous amount of time to make victims wait for some kind of justice or determination on whether they're going to indict him or not for those crimes.
That is,
Cool.
yeah, that is just friggin' ridiculous. I mean,
It is.
It's hard to say sometimes though, because even here you'll hear a story that's taken so many years to work through the courts, but there's sometimes good reasons for that. They really want to be sure, basically.
Yeah, we haven't been able to figure out what's up with that case. I've not been following it like super closely, but closely enough because the victims are speaking out on Twitter and stuff even at this point because they're so desperate for some justice.
It's like they're getting ignored by the actual authorities even. Right.
That's what it looks like.
Okay, so Jen with one N also says, I also went off on JW's outside Comic-Con this past June.
Nice.
And then Hans has our last question. Hans P.S. Hansen. He said he's heard it exists. A group has split out from Scientology. Do you know something about that?
Well, there are groups and individuals who call themselves independent Scientologists. And they believe in Scientology and Hubbard's principles and methods, but they believe that the church itself has become corrupt in some fashion, or they get kicked out of the church because they complain about something they shouldn't be complaining about. And they end up being kicked out and declared suppressive persons and shunned. So they continue practicing it. For the most part, I think, from the numbers and from what I've seen, it's kind of a stepping stone in a recovery process. Like you step out, but you're not ready to give up all the beliefs yet. So you hold on to those and you keep practicing it with other people outside the church because you can't keep going back into the churches. And gradually you then start getting on the internet and you start learning all this stuff that the church was never going to let you know about. And then they start realizing that the practices and the guidelines and the beliefs aren't really that great after all. And there's perfectly wonderful things they can do in real life that give them much more joy than, Scientology. And they just kind of drop it altogether. Some few people stick with it and remain these hardcore independent Scientologists. And, in the end, I kind of feel sorry for them. But people are free to choose their own path and do whatever they want. And so that's what some of them do.
Cool.
That's fair enough. I had a question that one of the sort of prominent former Scientologists that was well known, who's now, from what I've heard, sort of gone back, Marty Rathbun. Do you know much about this guy?
Yeah, he hasn't gone back. He left the church. He was second in command of the church. I mean, he was way up there. He left. He disappeared for a while. Then he came out as an independent Scientologist, and then he got married. And then the church was stalking and harassing him and his new wife, who was never a Scientologist. She never had anything to do with it. And they were stalking and harassing them and really making their lives miserable. So the Rathbuns took Scientology to court to get them to stop harassing them. And this went on for a couple of years, this case, and we were all following it very closely, and it was going along at great guns, doing a good job. And suddenly Marty pulled the plug. and stopped the case and stopped talking and just stopped. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, came these videos he was making, trashing Scientology critics, trashing Leah's show specifically.
Yeah.
He wrote a blog post about me. He wrote, I mean, he just kind of went nuts.
As I recall that.
And all this stuff was coming out. Now, I don't think he actually went a little nuts. I think what happened is him and his wife caved to the pressure. And that's pretty understandable. I mean, given the amount of pressure they were under. It was very disappointing. It was very upsetting. It was really upsetting that he caved so much that he started giving in to the church's demands, which was pretty obviously what happened. I don't think he pulled the plug on his own court case and then went and made all these videos all on his own. That doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it was such a friggin' backflip.
Yeah, the only reason those videos make any sense at all is because the church made him make them. Basically, he debunked everything he ever said about Scientology himself. He debunked himself and made himself completely irrelevant. And then he disappeared. And that was really sad that whole thing happened. I don't know if they paid him off. I have no idea. No one knows. But he did do what he did, and that's the story with him.
Well, one thing I'm really glad that you at least assured us he's not that he went back in or anything, because that is a lot of speculation goes around on the internet, and that's something that is rumored. But there is that other side that obviously
I haven't seen any evidence of that.
Yeah, no, and it's just frustrating not knowing and having to look at that speculation. Like going, look, you don't know. But it's also sort of good to know that at least he's all right. Even if he did have to do what he had to do, if that means he gets to live a peaceful life now, that'd be nice, I reckon.
I suppose so. Ultimately, I will say that would be true. I've got a lot of anger directed at that guy, and he was always kind of a jerk. So, personally, I don't really, it's not like I got a lot of sympathy going right now for the guy.
No, fair call. I'm not asking for any.
In a general sense, I understand the pressure, and I would not want to live my life under that kind of pressure that they were putting him under. It would be incredibly stressful. And so if they offered him an opportunity to pull the plug, gave him some money, and had him do some videos in order to debunk himself, I get it. I get what happened. I get why it happened. It sucks that the church kind of won that round, so to speak, but ultimately they're losing the war. So I'm not really too concerned about Marty Rathbun. Yeah.
Although, I didn't mean to bring him up if, you weren't too fond of the guy. That wasn't my intention, obviously. I was just curious. Especially as it's something that goes on the internet, so.
No, totally. I'm just being honest about how I feel about the guy. I don't mind talking about him.
No, I appreciate that too. So I think you said Nadine, that was Hans had the last question. Is there no more that have popped up?
Yeah, I have a.
Maybe you think we'll finish up on
another comment that Dean Kruger said that he said, Scientology, it's a hustle when it's the only big in first world countries. Sure, they have a small presence in third world, but they don't waste their time where there is no one to fleece.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good.
You will not. I have said from the beginning, Scientology is a church. It is not a charity. They will not. You do not see Scientology doing charitable things. I mean, they put a box out and gather canned goods during Christmas, and they might gather some clothes for some homeless people every now and again. But otherwise, man, forget it. Everything you see Scientology doing in the big wide world, they are doing for the only reason they're doing it is to get people on board with Scientology, not for just humane charity purposes. That's for sure.
With the charity work, it's similar in the way I think of what the Dubs do, and a lot of other religious ones, where they sort of just dabble in charity just enough to make it look like they're great and nice charitable people. And, they can use that as their propaganda piece.
Exactly.
But, all right, well, I think we'll do a bit of a wrap-up. Did you want to do any shout-outs for anything in the future or any of your shows coming up, Chris?
Well, if you haven't checked out my channel, please do so. I'm on YouTube under my name, Chris Shelton. And of course, you can always find my book on Amazon. I've written a book about Scientology. It is called Scientology A to Xenu, an insider's guide to what Scientology is really all about. And that is a critical analysis of the subject. It is not my memoir. I always have to differentiate that because most people's books coming out of Scientology is their story, and that is not what my book is. My story is pretty boring. I mean, I've got some ups and downs and everything, but I don't really mean to say it's. Yeah, I don't mean to say it's boring, but you know, it's. I didn't start speaking out because I wanted to tell my story. I started speaking out because I wanted to expose Scientology for the destructive cult that it is, and so my critical analysis of the subject is in the book, and it breaks down Hubbard and Scientology and the beliefs and all the upper level stuff and how they got tax exemption. By the way, that's all in there. And there's 3 chapters in there on recovering from Scientology, which I think has been useful for other people from other groups too. So Absolutely. You can get that on Amazon as an audiobook or as a hardcover or...
it's in the links in the chat.
Look at that.
Great.
Nadine is
awesome.
all over it.
Nadine, awesome. Okay. So yeah, and then my website, mncriticalthinking.com. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
And
thanks for having me on. This was fun.
Oh, not a problem at all, Chris.
Yeah.
It's been great. I figured, Nadine, if you wanted to give yourself a quick shout out because you're here as well.
Nadine Callan, my just click the 3 dots next to my name in the chat. And Creations by Nadine, my other channel for crafting. So yeah,
it'll be linked. It'll all be linked in the description down below. Well, Chris, thank you very much.
I noticed those. What is that you have knitted on your microphone there?
Oh,
Did you make that?
The headphones are great, but the foamy stuff that they put on here kind of fell apart because they're a little bit older. They still work great though. So I just crocheted one day during a stream. I crocheted a wind sock and a couple of ear covers to replace.
I saw that. I wondered if you made that. That's clever.
And,
that was very clever.
Of course, my necklace and just about everything. Well, everything else.
Pretty much everything. Yeah.
Chain mail, and I do just about everything.
That's
awesome.
Creations by Nadine. She does awesome.
Yeah.
work.
Thank you.
No, not a problem.
And
So, Chris, it was awesome having you on. I hope this didn't go too long because I was hoping, it wouldn't take up all your night or anything. But thank you.
No, we're
very
good.
much.
I'm gonna wrap up here and edit my Q&A video for tomorrow now.
Ooh, awesome. I look forward to watching it. All right, guys. Well,
Awesome.
everyone in the chat, thank you very much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. I hope we answered at least as many questions as we could. And if you do have any more questions, throw them down in the comments below, and I don't know, we'll see what happens if anyone ever gets to them. But thank you again, Chris. Thank you, Nadine. I hope you all have a wonderful night over there in America land. And we shall catch y'all later.